to watch and to catch up on. I'd really encourage you to do that. But I love this stat that 1 in 3 non-Christians, and I went onto the talkingjesus.org site, and it's right there in the survey. They surveyed about 4,000 people, and 1 in 3 non-Christians wants to chat with a Christian about Jesus. That's incredible, isn't it? It's absolutely amazing, and it kind of sets a harsh background to the reality of our lives, which is often that we don't live like that's true, do we? We don't live like that's true. We live like it's like 1 in 1,000, and we're petrified of what the other 999 might do if we talk to them about Jesus. And I know for myself that so often it's that fear of what people might think about me. It's the thought that they might think I'm crazy for offering to pray for them, or just, I don't know, a desire within me, and I think within all of us, just to fit in and just to kind of go with the flow and be part of the crowd. I know I would identify with, and I wonder how many of you would identify with, the other thing that he said is that we've professionalized evangelism, that we make it, and I loved what Topo was praying a minute ago because it does the exact opposite, and the songs that we were singing do the exact opposite, that we professionalize it and say, well, it's about that special one person who's great at talking about Jesus, or that special one person who's really well educated on apologetics and how to share your faith in the public arena. And what's funny about that, and what's funny about this whole fear thing that we've got going on, is that the reality, like we've said, is that people are open, and not just that they're open to conversations, but actually the way they've set their lives up is pretty fragile. That they might think we're crazy, but they'll soon be very intrigued, because the way people set their lives up is a bit fragile. Let me explain. People nowadays are open to pretty much any kind of idea or philosophy that is put forward. If it's presented well, if it's done in a good TED talk, or if it's done on a nice graphic on Instagram, we kind of like it. We like good ideas, we like nice quotes, and what you find is that people's lives are now made up not of truth, not of a single set of ideas, but of this sort of super philosophy, super ideology of life that is combining the best of all the bits of religions, of cults, of personalities around the world. And we say, well, I'll take that thing that Adam said, that was really inspiring, I'll take that and I'll pull that right into centrally how I feel. And actually, Ali's part of this club over here, and they have this really good way of doing this, and so I'll pull that in. And actually, all we do is we just combine these sort of great things about everything else, and we pull it all together into this thing that we define as a great lifestyle, a great ideology, a great philosophy. And actually, what we're starting to see is that as people do that, as we settle on that, and then we try and live by it, it falls apart pretty quickly. When people build an ideology of, and I don't know about, like, I have an interesting sort of YouTube kind of subscriber list. I like to listen widely and watch widely. There's a big thing about fitness and about self-improvement and all that sort of stuff, which, as you can tell, I've taken to heart and I live out on a day-to-day. But there's all these guys, single in their 20s, who are like packing on muscle. They're like getting absolutely ripped. They're in competitions. And I'm just sat there as a dad going, what happens when you guys have kids? Your nice little routine of, I can live for myself. I can eat what I want. I can get up when I want. I can go to bed when I want. I can take my nap. If you have a kid, your whole routine goes to pot, and your whole lifestyle will have to change. And the whole way you've built your life will totally shift. But you've built it around yourself. And you've put something in there and you've said, this is who I am. But it's all built around the specific moment of life that I'm in. And so when something changes about my life, or even having a kid, or if I break my leg for 6 months, your whole life just goes completely kaput. Actually, as followers of Jesus, we build our life on the truth. And what people are hungering for is truth. People are seeing the frailty and the thinness of ideologies, of ways of life that are built around things that fail, and they're asking for truth. And the reason why some people are offended sometimes by Christianity is because we are a people of truth, not just a people of ideas. We like ideas because they change and they can be flexible. We don't generally as a culture like truth because it means if it's true, we have to live by it. And that's hard because we can't change the bits we don't like. We can't customize it and make it our own. We have to live by it. And it's really true. It's true that Jesus did come and live as a man, as God in human flesh, and he lived amongst us. It's true that he really lived a perfect life, that he didn't sin. It's true that he was killed to pay the penalty for my wrong and for your wrong. It's true that he really did rise again, making a new way for life for those who put their faith in him. He really did then ascend to be with the Father, where he's now seated, praying for us, interceding for us, and he really will come back again one day. And he really will make everything that is sad and bad about this world come untrue. And he really will see his kingdom come on this earth in new creation. This is not just a nice set of ideas. It's not another philosophy on life. It's not another custom-made thing, but it's truth. And it's truth that can transform our lives and the lives of the people around us. And it's because the gospel is true that John Stott says this, that the gospel is both a debt to discharge and a power to experience. That we are indebted to the people who we do life with to share Jesus with them, because we know that he's the one who can save them. But we also must know that powerful effect of that good news on our own lives. Because if we don't know it for ourselves and we go around like a bashing cymbal saying, come on, convert to Christianity, Jesus is the way, well then, not very many people will get saved. And if they do, they'll be doing so out of fear and not out of a sense of encounter with God. So let's have a look at these two statements then, that the gospel is a debt to be discharged and a power to experience. They come from verses 14, 15, 16 and 17 of Romans 1, the passage we just heard. So let's look at how the gospel firstly is a debt to be discharged. Verse 14 and 15 say this, for I, that's Paul speaking, have a great sense of obligation to people in both the civilized world and the rest of the world, to the educated and the uneducated alike. So I'm eager to come to you in Rome too to preach the good news. The Greek word that Paul uses for him being under obligation is the word debtor. That he is a debtor to the people of Rome and to the people of the known world at the time in the gospel. That he is under obligation to share the gospel with them. I don't know about you, but I've never really been in any kind of debt in any serious way. I carried a couple £100 in an overdraft when we got married, and thankfully Ali's good stewardship meant that when the two became one, my debt was wiped clean. But I haven't really ever carried serious debt. The most I've probably ever been in debt was to Ali's dad when I got my first job, and I didn't have a car, I didn't have my driving license at the time, and so I needed to cycle to work, and I had to cycle from Hedge End to Millbrook, which was an impressive journey. Maybe not for some of you, but it was for me. And there's all sorts of hills through Bitter. It's horrible. That's not... I wasn't expecting a laugh there. And to get to work, I needed this bike, but I didn't have any money to buy the bike because I was being paid at the end of the month that I'd started working. So Mike said, "Don't worry, I'll get you a bike." And he got me a really nice road bike. And he just said, "I'll pay me back." And if you know Mike, you know he's like this, pay me back whenever you can. Don't worry about it. With my very first paycheck, I paid him back the full amount because I didn't want him. We'd been dating for like a month, so I was like, I don't want him to get a bad impression. So I just said, here you go, here's all the money back, because I recognised that I didn't want to be in his debt and that it wasn't a good thing for me to be in debt. Now, he thought I was a bit silly and a bit proud, but it meant that it was done and we were all good on that front. And I don't know about you, but we recognise, don't we, that it is not good to be in debt. It's all right when it's your father-in-law. He would have let me get away with paying it back. He probably would never have, if I'd never paid it, he'd probably be all right with it. But that's the straightforward kind of debt. But it's not the kind of debt that we are talking about and that Paul is talking about with the gospel. Now, let me illustrate this to you. I have on my person a £10 note. And so, Emma, I'm going to give you this £10 note, but it's not for you, unfortunately. That's the bad news. That £10 note, I want you to give it to Linda. I don't want you to give it now, but I want you to make sure that by the end of the morning, you give that to Linda. Who is Emma in debt to? She's not in debt to me because I've given away the tenner. I've given her that gift. Now, I've not given it to her for her. I've given it to her to pass on. And so the debt is to Linda. Right now, Emma owes Linda a tenner, and she really does, because that's Linda's tenner that I borrowed for the purpose of the illustration. So she really does. It's not my please give it back to her. Otherwise, I will be in debt. But that £10 is intended for Linda, and it's the same with the gospel. You see, as followers of Jesus, we carry a gift. We've both received a tenner for ourselves, but we've also been given a tenner. And we've also been given that gift to share the good news of Jesus with those around us in our lives. And it's like we walk around with that £10 in our pockets. And we have to make that decision. We have to think it through whether or not we're going to remain in debt to the people in our lives or whether we're going to try and discharge that debt. Paul, he knew it was not a good idea or a good thing to be in debt, especially when the debt came to the gospel. He was eager, it says, to preach the good news in Rome and right across different people groups, different nations, different civilizations. Why? Because he wanted to discharge his debt. He didn't want to hang on to the stuff that God had given him that was intended for the people around him. And John Stott simply says this, he says, good news is for sharing. We carry good news. That's what the gospel means. It's the good news about Jesus. And I don't know about you, but you might have noticed that we live in a cultural moment that loves bad news and says bad news is for sharing. You only have to flick on the news or read your paper or get on your app to know that in our day, bad news is promoted far and away beyond good news. News of financial crisis, politicians breaking more rules, global and civil conflicts, murder, rape, robbery, lies, slander, hate. It's everywhere. It's all we ever digest if we're on those websites or reading those papers. Very rarely do we see the front page spread with a load of good news on it, do we? And do we feel the weight of the debt that we need to discharge? We carry good news in a world that is full of bad news. And it would be like hanging on to that tenner is like walking around and seeing those people and saying, oh, I know exactly what could change your bad news into good news. I know exactly how to see your bad moment become a good moment. But I'm actually just going to hang on to it. And God says that's like being in debt. Do we feel the weight of that challenge that we need to discharge? And I love gathering here on a Sunday morning. I really do. It is the high point of my week often. But I recently heard someone say that if we've prioritized our gatherings as Christians, if we've made that the main point of our Christian living, then we've probably left behind and abandoned the mission of Jesus. Which is a bit of a weighty challenge, I know. And it's not wrong to look forward to church, and it's not wrong to come, and I'm glad you're here. But Jesus' mission was to seek and save those who are lost. I think someone said recently, Jesus spent about 2 or 3% of his time in the temple. And he spent the rest of it with people, over a meal table, encountering with people in the marketplace, getting down in the dirt with people. How often do we walk through life holding on to the gospel like it's this precious thing that I need to not lose or break? How often do we sit with our tenner and sort of stroke it and fold it out and fold it up and fold it and just play with it and say, no, I've got to hold on to this and I've got to get through life just hanging on to my tenner, make sure no one steals it, make sure I don't lose it. When in reality, we hold within our lives the power to see change released into the lives of those that we love. And I wonder, whose debt are you in this morning? Whose debt are you in this morning? Is it a neighbour? Is it a friend? Is it a sister? Or is it a flatmate? Whoever it is, you owe it to them. Literally, you owe it to them to share Jesus with them. Paul talks about the gospel as being a debt that we need to discharge, but he also talks about the gospel as it being a power to experience. Verse 16 and 17 of chapter 1, which a guy called Martin Lloyd-Jones, who was a preacher a few decades ago, is a brilliant preacher. He, as part of the prep for this series, he's written a series of books that are a compilation of all his preaches that he did when he preached every Friday night through Romans from chapter 1 to chapter 9. And as part of prepping for this, I read the first book, which was on Romans 1, and it was 400 pages long just on chapter 1. So it was a heavy read. I haven't taken on the rest of the chapters. I'm just going to read the bits that I'm preaching on. But it was a long read. But he's got a lot to say. But he says in verses 16 and 17 are the most important verses in the whole of Scripture. So when someone who's preached through this book that long says that, we should listen up, shouldn't we? Paul says this, "For I am not ashamed of this good news about Christ. It is the power of God at work, saving everyone who believes, the Jew first and also the Gentile. This good news tells us how God makes us right in his sight, and it's accomplished from start to finish by faith. As the scriptures say, it's through faith that a righteous person has life." The gospel is not just something we are duty-bound to share. If it was only a debt to discharge, then there would be no joy in our walking with Jesus, would there? God might as well have created a bunch of robots to go around and communicate the message of Jesus. But he wants us speaking. He wants us sharing unashamedly. He wants us connecting not just with the message, but with the person who brings the message. Paul says he's not ashamed because he knows the power of the gospel that has been worked out in his own life. And this starts for Paul with him knowing and remembering how much he needed that good news about Jesus. Just how far from God he was in and of himself in his own sin. And again, our culture doesn't particularly like this part of the gospel. The fact that we need a saviour. The fact that in and of ourselves we need to acknowledge that we are not enough. I like the film, The Greatest Showman. I remember going to see it in the cinema for the first time and being I was like, oh, what's all the hype about? Oh, it's actually a pretty good film. But in the heart of that film is the song, This Is Me. And it's chart-topping, smash hit. And I think the reason it's a smash hit is because it sums up and captures something of the sort of expressive individualism. Now, I'm not trying to rob you of the joy. If this is your favourite song, I'm sorry. But it captures something of this moment of like expressive individualism that says, I've got enough within me to get through life. Listen to some of the lyrics. I'm not going to sing it. Listen to some of the lyrics. I'm not a stranger to the dark. Look out, here I come. Marching to the beat that I drum. I'm brave, this is me. This catches something of the heartbeat of our culture that says, I am wonderful just as I am, thank you very much. I don't need anyone else, I don't need anyone's opinion, I don't need anyone's help. Even if I'm totally in a mess, even if I'm in that dark place, I've got what it takes to get through. This is me. And our danger is that in our efforts to share our faith, we are tempted to present only the inoffensive parts of God. And therefore we pitch him to people like we're on Dragon's Den or something like that. And we say, hey guys, I've got a great suggestion for you. That maybe with this problem that you're having, you should check out Jesus because he quite likes to heal people. Or he quite likes to take things away that are making people sad. Well, that's true, and God loves to bless us, and I'm not saying that's not true. In fact, the fact that we're all here is proof of God's grace on an undeserving people, isn't it? But actually, we've got to preach the whole good news. And that includes the bit about the fact that we need Jesus. It includes the bit about acknowledging that we are sinners. And Lloyd Jones, this is not the kind of thing that would make up the lyrics of a smash hit song. But Martin Lloyd-Jones says this, that the offence of the cross is that I am so condemned and so lost and so hopeless that if he, Jesus Christ, had not died for me, I would never know God and I could never be forgiven. And that hurts. That annoys. That tells me I'm hopeless. That tells me I'm vile. That tells me I'm useless. And as a natural man, I do not like it. Again, not Greatest Showman ain't taking that one up for their next song. But it's true. It's true. And it's like the other illustration that Lloyd Jones has is, it's like if, imagine for a moment that I had a terrible condition from birth that meant that I walked around with loads of pain in my leg and I limped. It was very obvious to you. And I had that from birth. I had it my whole life, and it had just robbed me of all the joy that Jesus had had for me in my life. And so I'm walking around, I'm in pain all the time. I'm grumpy because I'm in pain all the time. I've had so many doctor's appointments in the 30 years that I've been on the planet. I'll say I'm 60. I've had so many doctor's appointments for the time I've been on earth, and I'm just fed up, and there's no hope, and there's no way out. I've just resigned myself to this is how I'm always going to be. And then one day the doctor picks up the phone. He says, Tom, I've got this new trial medication that I want you to take. I want you to come on down and collect it. I'm going to give you a prescription for it. So I go down, see the doctor, get my prescription. There's no way this is going to work. I go to the pharmacy. I say, yeah, cash this for me. Great. You take one part of you take the first bit of your medication, and immediately you start to feel different. And immediately the pain starts to subside, and you start to feel free, and you start to move around, and you think, my goodness me, I've lived with this thing for my whole life, but I'm starting to feel freedom. And then before you know it, a couple of hours later, you're totally and utterly healed. And a week later, you are still living in the good of that, and you're walking down the street, and you see this person where John Banks is sat, and he's walking towards you, and you say, I don't know him at all. I don't recognize him at all, but I recognize the way that he's walking. I recognize the limp that he's got, because I had that limp. I recognize the way he's carrying himself, because that was how I was carrying myself when I'd been robbed of all the joy of life because of my condition. I don't know anything about him other than the fact he's got what I had. And in my pocket, I still have the prescription from the doctor. What do I do? What do I do? Do I call a taxi for him to say, take some weight off your feet, mate, I know how you feel? Do you not approach him because he might think you're crazy or rude for pointing out that there was something wrong with him? No, of course not. You're so full of joy. You're so full of the life that you've now got that you say, hey, mate, I cannot help but stop you and just say, here's something that's going to totally change and transform your life. Here's something that's going to see you in freedom from the thing that's bogged you down for the whole of your days here on planet Earth. Here's going to see life and joy return to your life. Of course we wouldn't hold on to it. But we're like that in the way we live, aren't we? We're sat there with the prescription in our pocket, fiddling with it again, folding it up and saying, I don't know if I can. I'm not sure. I don't know if I can. You and I were once far from God. And by the blood of Jesus, we've been brought near. I was once bitter and unforgiving, but I've now been released from that and set free into a life of being able to forgive other people, as well as receiving God's forgiveness for me and my mess. You will also have a testimony of how God has transformed your life by the power of his gospel, just like Paul did. And this should make us, this is not something that we can conjure up in and of ourselves. This is something that happens when we've truly encountered God. It should overflow from within us. That we should unashamedly tell others about this good news about Jesus. Evangelism is not something that we are merely obligated to do, but we should do it excitedly and joyfully knowing that the God who saved us and rescued us could do the same for those in our lives. So how do we respond? Because again, even though we know it's a duty and a debt that we need to discharge, and it's also a power that we have experienced and can see others experience, there's still things that get in our way, isn't there? And just to respond, I want to just think through some practical things and some myths that we might need to bust about evangelism. Myth number one: I have to be more educated and know my Bible better in order to evangelize someone. Tom, you might, it's great, and I love the people in my life, and I want to share Jesus, but I just can't. I'm not very articulate. I don't know my Bible all that well. What am I supposed to do? Well, the reality is, if you don't know your Bible very well, and if you're not very articulate and you're not very confident speaking to people, you still have a story to tell. You still have a story to tell. God has given each of us as his followers a testimony. So even if you've never read a single verse in the Bible, you will be able to share your faith, your story about how God has changed and transformed your life with the people around you just by telling your story. Just by saying, do you know what? When God found me, I was like this, and this is some of the stuff that I was hanging on to. But even if I can't explain it using any great words, now I'm like this. And I know that's because of Jesus and not because of anyone else or anything else. Josh Howard, an American guy who's planted churches into India, says this: your story opens hearts. God's story changes hearts. How many hearts can you see opened? Again, salvation belongs to the Lord. We'll talk about that in a minute. But all we've got to do is share our story. It's an opportunity for someone just to say, hey, just tell me about, why do you follow Jesus? Rather than giving them a theological answer, just tell them your story and see what God does with that. Myth number two: successful evangelism means people should get saved every time I share the gospel with them. How many times do we fall into this trap? Evangelism's only worth it if people decide to follow Jesus on the spot after talking to me, or say yes to my invitation to Alpha, or whatever it might be. Well, the reality is that we can rest in the knowledge that people's eternal destiny lies with Jesus and not with us. There's no pressure on us in that sense. We don't save anyone. When people say, my mission is to, do this and win souls, it's like, no, Jesus wins the souls. Jesus' salvation really does belong to him. And I just want to stick something up on the screen that I found really, really helpful, which is called the Engel scale. Some of you might have come across this. It's the steps that people take from not knowing anything about God and not even having a Christian in their life to knowing Jesus and then on into discipleship and relationship with him. And often what we do is we say, I've got to get someone from wherever they are on 1 to 9 to number 10. So when I see them, when I come across Emma in the street, she might be at number 1. She might be a Muslim person who's just arrived in the country and has never even heard the name of Jesus. And I've got to somehow in the next 30 seconds by doing the magic stuff, got to get her to number 10. And then sometimes we fall in the trap of people's journey stops at number 10. And we don't take them on into actual life with Jesus and into discipleship and following him. Do you know, all you have to do is try and move someone one step further along. All you have to do. I hung out with some guys on Thursday night who I met through my work in the commercial stuff. They helped build the website. 2 lads in their 20s, living the dream, running their small business in their little office in Whiteley. And they said, I'll come over and play some FIFA. And I was a bit nervous. I haven't played FIFA in a while, but I thrashed them. And we were just talking, and I didn't say really anything at all. I wasn't that brave. I've shared my testimony with one of them before, but I wasn't that brave on the evening. They just know I'm a Christian. And for all I know, they don't know anyone else who's a Christian. So they're on number 3, say, for example. And all we were doing was just hanging out. And then one of them said, do you know why you keep winning? It's because you've got God on your side, isn't it? And I said, yes, it is. I was praying on the way of it. But it just sparked a little conversation of, well, what does it really mean to be a Christian? Well, no, actually, and so maybe I might have got them from 3 to 4. I might not, but I might have got them from 3 to 4 to say, actually, I'm a little bit interested in what you carry. You're not like the other guys that I'm hanging out with. You're not like the people in my life. Is that a failure because I didn't share my testimony with them on Thursday night? No. Building a relationship with them and trying to get them closer to Jesus. And if my part in the story is get them interested in Jesus, and then they go to a church in Whiteley and get saved, and brilliant. That's all part, I think, again, it was Gav Calver said last week, isn't it? 5 or 6 people to make a disciple. Stop pretending it's just one. Stop living like it's just you who's responsible for getting people into the kingdom of God. I can knock that round if people are interested, or you can Google it, it's just the Engel scale. But it's helpful in us just thinking through, actually, I don't need to get people all the way to the end. And that is helpful for us when we've been in relationship with people for decades and we've only ever seen them go from 1 to 2. Actually, that might be your part to play over a really long period of time, and that's okay because salvation belongs to the Lord. And myth number 3 is that the first thing I need to do when I leave this place is just to get going. I'm going to go out, I'm going to go to my neighbour, I'm going to give them an alpha invite, I'm going to share, I'm going to go. The reality is that evangelism begins with us on our knees. When was the last time you wept for the people around you who didn't know Jesus? When was the last time you got on your knees for this area, for your neighbourhood, for your family? Paul tells us that it's the good news about God and the power of God that sees people saved. It's all about Jesus. And so it's him that we need to get before. It's him that we need to come before and say, God, would you start moving in my life so that the gospel would flow out from me and into the lives of the people around me? God, I'm desperate to see so-and-so's situation changed. Only you can do that. So God, would you move? Before I even walk across the street and share my alpha invite with my friend, would you start working in their hearts? Because without you, it won't happen. And J. Edwin Orr says this: whenever God is ready to do something new with his people, he always sets them to praying. And I just want to make the point about it's prayer and fasting. The Bible does talk about both. We like to leave fasting off at the end. But it talks about prayer and fasting. How hungry I was. We were fasting recently and it got to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I was like, the rumblings were going on. There were snacks all around the office. It was a nightmare. And I was ready to go over to the biscuit tin and God just said, how hungry are you? How hungry are you to see me do this that you're praying about today? I said, God, I'm really hungry. I want to see you do this thing. Okay, well, stay hungry and stay praying then. How hungry are we to see this happen? When we go without food, it starts to say, actually, no, God, I am more hungry for you to move in my nation, in my town, in my neighborhood than I am for the next meal. Now, if you're really, really hungry, eat eventually. Don't go for days and days. You'll get unwell. But get hungry for what God is wanting to do and what you want to see happen in our nation. And the really practical step you can take to do that is to prioritize our Tuesday morning prayer times at the moment. They're just incredible. Some of the just times in the presence of God with his people, just saying, God, we're going to go after this situation today. We're going to go after you for this today. And we have introduced, the last couple of weeks, introduced a bit of an optional fast as well, which I'd encourage you to get on board with, even though it is nice to start at 6:30 with a bit of toast. It does make the day a bit more brutal, but I think we're going to start to see God to move, and we have seen God move as we've prayed and fasted. Let's get hungry together. But the first thing that we can do is just pray now. And so I wonder if the guys, you want to come back up, just ready to lead us in worship. And why don't we stand to our feet? I feel like for some people, there's just been a gentle reminder this morning of the power of the gospel for ourselves. A reminder of what Jesus has done in our lives. And if just in this moment as we pray, I'm just going to leave space and time open to the end of the meeting for us to pray in our own hearts or to gather the people around us. You can come and get prayer from the front if you'd like as well. But for some, we just need to recommit and just say, yeah, God, I've taken my eye off the ball. I've taken my eye off you. And I've forgotten just how powerful you are and how powerfully you've worked in my life. I just want to recommit myself to your plans and purposes. For others, we know the power, but we've just not been doing what we've said we were going to do. We've just been being disobedient. And you might say, I've just been a bit slow. Well, slow disobedience. Slow obedience is just disobedience, isn't it? So let's just take time out to say, God, I want to be obedient to how you're calling me to live. I want to discharge that debt. But for all of us, this starts on our knees in prayer to God. And you can get on your knees literally if you want, or just take some time praying. Just say, God, would you share the burden that you have for the lost in my life with me? I don't want to just comply with something that I read. I don't just want to do it out of a total sense of duty. I want to do it knowing the power of God at work in my life so that I might share it with others, so that I might share Jesus with others. And God, use me in whatever way you want to use me. I'm open. I submit to you afresh today. Just as the band plays, just take some time out, start praying, start lifting your voices. Don't worry about people listening in on your prayers. We're all praying.